Well, since one of our theme gardens this year is the variegated garden, I thought we'd show you a lot of variegated water garden plants because it's the time of year when we want to start putting our water gardens back together. And the plants that I'm going to show you today are all marginal plants. That means that in the wild they would grow around the edges or margins of a pond, lake, or stream, or in boggy type areas. And the thing about marginal water garden plants is that they basically, as a rule of thumb, need water over them, say from just moist soil to about 6 inches deep. So anywhere in there you're okay. You don't want to put them in the deepest part of your pool. Now, just because they're an edge type plant, that doesn't mean you have to put them at the edge of your water garden, because if you want to put one of these out in the middle of your garden, you can just set it on top of an overturned pot. The important thing is to have it at the proper depth of water over the crown. Now I'm going to start with the tallest of the plants, although it doesn't look like it right now. This is the variegated cattail, and this plant can actually grow to be about 7 feet tall depending on where you plant it. Now it actually prefers full sun. However, it can stand a little bit of shade, and you can see how striking the variegation in the leaf is. It has a nice kind of cream colored variegation that goes all the way up and down the leaf, and it will in the fall have the usual cattails on it. Now I've got this planted in a pot, and it's full of clay soil again, covered with gravel so that the soil won't float up out of the pot. Now something else to think about marginals is they actually need to be fed, again, like most of our water plants. However, they're not as heavy feeders as the water lilies or the lotus. You'll remember a couple of weeks ago I was planting a lotus, and it needs fertilized about once a month. Now your marginals, for the most part, just need fertilized about 3 times a year. So in the spring when you're repotting or you're cleaning them up, put a plant tab in, and then again in midsummer and late summer, and that's about all the fertilizer they need. Now another very interesting variegated plant is the zebra rush, and this will actually get to be about 3 feet tall. And this is kind of an example of something that your marginal plants can do for you. They actually add a vertical element to your water garden. Where you have the plants along the plane top of the water, you also can have a vertical element, and the zebra rush is actually a very nice plant to have. It is hardy here, so it'll overwinter outside, and you can see when you look at the leaf how it gets its name. You can see these bands of cream here, and they actually have a nice striped effect to them. Now this is actually a mutation of a green form. So what can happen with this plant is that it can start to revert back to the green form. If you get a zebra rush and you see you're getting some of your spikes that are just green, you'll need to get those out of there, because those will actually take over and you'll lose your variegation. So what you can do when you're dividing is just pull those out of the pot. Now another great water garden plant, in fact one of my favorites, is the variegated umbrella plant. You can see here it almost looks like a straw, a green and white straw, the variegation here and then on the leaf. Now this actually needs to be planted in maybe a shadier area, because of the variegation on the leaves can actually burn in full sun. So if you've got it in an area where it's sheltered during that hot afternoon sun, that will be good for it. Now this plant can actually grow about 3 feet tall, so it's in between the usual umbrella plant, which is about 5 feet tall, and the dwarf, which is about 2 feet. Now again, this plant can be in water from 2 to 6 inches deep, or you can actually just have it in very moist soil. And it is a tropical, so it won't overwinter outside. However, it makes a good house plant too, and you can just bring it in and either set it in a tray of water or keep the soil very moist and overwinter it quite nicely indoors. Now right next to it we've got another very striking variegated plant. This is the variegated spider lily, and you can see this absolutely wonderful leaf on it, and this will have a beautiful white spider lily bloom later in the summer. It will come up on a stalk, and it'll be a nice big white flower, kind of a tubular shaped flower with spider-like appendages coming off of it. Now the variegated spider lily again is not winter hardy here. However, it's pretty easy to overwinter it indoors. This is related to an amaryllis bulb, so you can store it much like you would an amaryllis. You can lift the bulb out of the soil and let that dry, and then just store it in a brown paper bag in a dry, cool area, kind of in a dormant state, and then plop that back down in the soil in the summer. Now next to it we've got another plant that'll get about 2 feet tall, and this is actually a crushed ice Sagittaria. And you can see here, to me it almost looks like a pothos. It's got this nice scattered white variegation on it, and this plant will grow to be about 2 feet tall, and it is winter hardy here, so you can leave it out in your pond over the winter. Now if you want some yellow type variegation, you might go for the golden Japanese Acorus. And these nice, almost iris type looking leaves, even though it isn't an iris, are very nice in the garden. Now this likes sun, but it also can tolerate shade for you, and it will have a nice big clump in it by the end of the season. Now it is winter hardy here, and will get to be about a foot tall overall. Now here we have what I think is a very fun plant. This is a variegated water celery, or flamingo, and you can see here it's got green, cream, and also a little bit of pink on the leaves. The color kind of reminds me of the tricolored sweet potato. Now this will get to be about a foot tall, and it's kind of iffy as if it's winter hardy here or not. I think in a sheltered spot it would go ahead and be winter hardy. It's hardy to zone 7, so it would depend on where you plant it. This plant can actually be quite invasive, so you'll want to put it in a pot because otherwise it might take over your pond for you. And speaking of invasive plants, the last plant that I want to show you we've used out here at Oklahoma Gardening as a ground cover, and it is actually quite invasive, and it is actually an excellent water garden plant. In fact, it probably lends itself better to being planted in a pot so you contain it than it would in this ground cover situation where you have to fight it all the time, and that is Houtunia. This is actually the cultivar chameleon, and we have this nice heart-shaped leaf with many different colors on it. And this will actually come up in the spring. It is winter hardy here. And if we would just dig this up and plant it in a pot with our clay soil and a little bit of rock on it and put it at the edge of our pond, it will do very well as a nice marginal plant for our water garden. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this review of some of the great variegated water garden plants. And right now I would like to thank both Sanctuary Water Gardens and Patio Garden Ponds for donating the plants for this segment.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.